This world had a name once, but names are a luxury for the living. And this planet was a graveyard. It was a sphere of rust and ruin. The wind didn't howl here. It scraped. It was the sound of a billion glass insects being dragged across stone, a dry, constant, invasive sound that worked its way into your teeth. The sky was a bruised, sickly orange, choked with red dust that tasted like iron. Nothing grew here. Everything rotted, or rusted. It was into this sky that the albatross fell. Dr. Aris Kaine gripped the stabilization bar until her knuckles turned white. Alarms shrieked, a sound of tearing metal filling the cockpit. Her research vessel wasn't built for combat. It wasn't built for whatever that Grak'tha patrol ship had hit it with. Mayday! Mayday! She choked out, her voice tight with G-forces. Alliance Vessel Albatross, Vector Unknown, Atmospheric Entry. I am. The console exploded in a shower of sparks. The ship lurched, a violent, bone-jarring spiral. Aris saw the red desert floor rushing up to meet her. She didn't scream. She didn't have time. She just braced. The impact was not a sound. It was an end. A sudden, violent cessation of everything. Then darkness. She woke up to the sound of scraping. For a moment, she thought it was the ship cooling, settling. But no, it was the wind, the planet's voice, welcoming her to the graveyard. Her body ached. A quick self-assessment. Ribs cracked definitely. Left arm probably broken. Her environmental suit was intact, but flashing a dozen proximity warnings. She was alive, which was perhaps not a blessing. Aris forced the emergency hatch. It hissed, then ground open onto the desolate landscape. The albatross was gone. It was a scar of blackened metal, half buried in a deep, red rock canyon. She had survived, but her ship was dead. She stumbled out onto the sand, her legs weak. The air was thin, but breathable. She kept her mask on anyway. The wind, that sound, it was already driving her mad. She was alone, utterly. She salvaged what she could. A medical kit, 2 power cells, a standard-issue plasma pistol, and the emergency transponder. She activated it. The small device let out a weak, repeating ping. A signal, a digital prayer cast into the oppressive orange sky. In the rust-colored desolation, she was a beacon. She didn't know what kind of things were drawn to the light. Klee knew the sound of the wind. He knew the scraping. But this was different. He and his tribe, the Faelen, were running. They had been running for 3 cycles. The Grak'tha the Hunger had found their last waterhole. They had shattered the moisture pumps, not for need, but for sport. Klee, small, gray-skinned, and agile, scrambled over the rocks, his bare feet finding holds his mother could no longer reach. He pulled her up. Her breathing was a ragged, wet sound. This way, the clan elder hissed, his voice like dry leaves. The deep canyons, they will not follow us into the shadows. It was a lie. The Grak'tha followed everywhere. They were the ones who made the shadows. Klee hated them. They were tall, brutal, masses of muscle and scarred hide, wrapped in metal they had stolen and armor they had broken. They carried weapons that spit contained energy, weapons that cooked the Faelen from the inside. They didn't hunt to eat. They hunted to harvest, to take. As the tribe scrambled down the narrow path into the lower canyons, Klee saw it, a new star in the middle of the day. It fell from the orange sky, trailing black smoke, a violent streak of fire that ended somewhere deep in the canyons they were running toward. The elder froze. He looked at the trail of smoke with superstitious terror. A bad omen, he whispered. A spirit of the dust, angered. But Klee only felt a cold dread. Omens, spirits, those were stories. That was noise. And noise drew the Grak'tha, as if summoned by the thought. A guttural roar echoed from the canyon rim above them. A Grak'tha patrol. They had been seen. Into the caves, the elder shrieked, panic breaking his voice. Scatter. The Faelen dissolved into the rocks, a frantic scramble for darkness. Klee and his mother tumbled down a loose scree slope, landing hard near the source of the smoke. The canyon floor was shattered. A massive metal thing was wedged between the walls, still hissing and popping. Klee stared. It was not a spirit. It was a structure. A hatch on the side of the metal beast was open, and something was moving. It was small, almost Faelen-sized, but it was wrapped in a strange white skin. It held a small black object that pinged. Klee's mother pulled him back, her fingers digging into his arm. A new creature. Not Grak'tha, but the universe had taught the Faelen one truth. Anything that wasn't Faelen was a predator. For kilometers away, on the high ridge, Corvus watched. He was not a spirit. He was not a demon. He was just annoyed. The desert was his. He had claimed this patch of rust and rock 5 years ago, after the Alliance had written him off as acceptable losses. He had survived. He had adapted. He had become the apex predator, not through size, but through silence. And this was not silent. First, the falling star. A high-altitude impact messed loud. It had scattered debris across his primary hunting trail. Second, the Faelen, the little gray ghosts. He usually ignored them. They were part of the landscape, like the wind. But now they were panicked, running, making noise, moving into the crash site. Third, the Grak'tha. Corvus adjusted the lens of his scavenged binoculars. He could see them on the ridge, 3 patrols, converging on the smoke, converging on the signal. His small drone spotter floated beside his head, its one working optical lens feeding him data. The Grak'tha were excited. They smelled new technology, new prey. Corvus lowered the binoculars. His rebreather mask hissed with the rhythm of his breathing. This was a problem. His territory was being invaded. If the Grak'tha got the technology from that crashed ship, if they got their hands on those Alliance power cells, they would get stronger, bolder. They would push deeper into his lands. They would become a bigger problem. And then there was the survivor. He could see her. Human. Alliance. The word tasted like ash in his mouth. He watched her, small, broken, holding that stupid beacon. She was the bait. The Faelen were the collateral. The Grak'tha were the infestation. Corvus sat on the rock, perfectly still, for 10 minutes. He watched the Grak'tha descend into the canyon. He watched the Faelen hide in the wreckage. He watched the human, Aris, raise her pistol, her hand shaking so badly she couldn't hit the rock she was aiming at. She was soft. They were all soft. He sighed. The hiss from his mask was the only sound. He could leave. Let the Grak'tha clean up the mess. But the mess would fester. Or he could clean it up himself. Permanently. He stood. He picked up his thunder spear, the long metal pole with a Grak'tha blade on one end and an industrial vibration cell on the other. He checked the charge on Stubborn, his ancient, noisy slug thrower. He was not going to save the Alliance scientist. He was not going to save the Faelen. He was going to take out the trash. Corvus and his drone moved over the ridge, disappearing into the red dust, becoming just another part of the scraping wind. Aris was hyperventilating. The thin air, the pain, the terror. She was hiding behind a hot engine block, her plasma pistol feeling uselessly small. Through a gap in the wreckage, she could see them. The little gray aliens. The Faelen. They were hiding just across from her, in a cave mouth obscured by the crash. A small one. Klee was watching her, his eyes wide, black pools of absolute fear. He wasn't her enemy. She knew prey when she saw it. The ground began to shake. A deep, guttural roar echoed through the narrow canyon. The real predators were here. The Grak'tha. Aris had read the Alliance briefs. Species Grak'tha. Status Apex. Brutal. Territorial. The briefs hadn't done them justice. They were massive. 8 feet tall, armored in scrap metal, their faces all tusks and malice. They fanned out, their energy weapons humming with the sickly green light. There were 12 of them. Aris looked at her pistol. She had maybe 20 shots. She looked at the Faelen. They were armed with rocks. "This is Alliance survivor Aris Kaine," she whispered into her transponder, knowing it was useless. I am besieged." The Grak'tha leader, a brute with a skull for a helmet, pointed at the wreckage. He barked an order. 2 of them advanced, firing at the wreckage. Energy bolts slammed into the hull, making the metal sing. Aris fired back. Her first shot was wild. The second hit one of the brutes in the shoulder plate. It barely registered. It just made him angry. He roared and charged. No, stay back." Suddenly, Klee, the small Faelen, darted from the cave. He threw a rock, a desperate, stupid, heroic act. The rock bounced harmlessly off the Grak'tha's armor. The brute stopped. It looked at Klee. A slow, cruel smile spread across its tusked face. It raised its weapon, savoring the new, smaller target. "Run!" Aris screamed, rising from her cover to fire. But she never got the shot off. A sound, sharp, metallic, echoed from the cliffs above. The Grak'tha brute, the one about to execute Klee, suddenly stiffened. It looked down. A long, jagged piece of metal, a spear, was protruding from the center of its chest. It didn't scream. It just gurgled and fell. Silence. Klee scrambled back to the cave, his mother pulling him into the darkness. Aris stared, her pistol lowered. The Grak'tha leader roared in rage, scanning the cliffs. "Show yourself, Corvus," he bellowed in a broken trade language. So it had a name. "Show." The canyon answered with silence. The wind scraped. Then, from the deepest shadow behind the Grak'tha, a figure rose. It was just a man, Aris thought. Skinny, wrapped in rags, wearing a grotesque mask. But he moved like smoke. Before the Grak'tha could turn the man, Corvus was upon them. It was not a battle. It was a harvest. Aris watched frozen. Klee watched mesmerized. The Grak'tha were strong. Corvus was efficient. He didn't fight their strength. He attacked their weaknesses. His spear wasn't just a blade. The back end, the vibration cell. He slammed it against the Grak'tha's knee. The sound of shattering bone was sickening. As the brute fell, Corvus spun, the blade end slicing through the unarmored neck of another. They fired their energy weapons, but he was never where they aimed. He used the wreckage. He used the shadows. He used them, pushing one brute into the line of fire of another. A small drone, his spotter, darted overhead, emitting a high-frequency pulse that made the Grak'tha clutch their heads, disoriented. It was brutal and practiced. The Grak'tha leader, the one with the skull helmet, finally cornered him. He raised his heavy blaster. There was a sharp, deafening report. Not the hum of energy. A chemical explosion. Aris flinched. The Grak'tha leader had a hole in his chest. He looked down, confused, and fell. Corvus stood over him, holding the source of the sound. An ancient, human, projectile weapon. A slug thrower. And then silence. The wind returned, scraping over the bodies of 12 dead Grak'tha. Corvus stood in the middle of the carnage, breathing heavily. His mask hissed. He was alive. They were alive. "Thank you," Aris whispered, stepping out from the wreckage, her pistol hanging limp at her side. I don't know how." Corvus didn't look at her. He walked, limping slightly past her. He went to the Grak'tha leader's body and began to loot it. He took the power cell. He took the skull helmet. He retrieved his spear. Aris watched in stunned silence. "Wait, we need help. I'm Alliance. I can reward you." Corvus ignored her. He walked over to her ship, the Albatross. He stepped inside the smoking ruin. Aris heard the sound of tearing metal. He emerged, holding her primary FTL capacitor. Piece of technology worth millions. "That's..." Aris started. "You can't." He stopped. He turned his head. The dark, cracked lenses of his mask stared right through her. He didn't speak. He didn't gesture. He just looked. Aris, an Alliance scientist, felt a fear deeper than anything the Grak'tha had inspired. This was not a hero. This was not a savior. This was the thing that survived. Klee and his mother crept out of the cave. They stared at Corvus, the little one. Klee took a small, shiny crystal from his pouch and placed it on the ground. An offering. Corvus looked at the crystal. He looked at Aris. He looked at his drone. Then he turned. He walked past the bodies, past the offering, past the survivors, and began to climb the canyon wall. "Wait!" Aris yelled. "Where are you going?" Corvus paused, halfway up the cliff face. He looked back, a silhouette against the dying orange sky. His filtered voice rasped over the wind. A single word. Wandering. And then he was gone. Aris and Klee were left in the sudden, terrible silence of the canyon alone with the dead. And the wind just kept scraping.